welcome to one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment indicating where you are watching from and the exact time you are listening to this narration. We are interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The ancient red rock formations of Sedona in southwestern Arizona not only offer breathtaking vistas rising towards the sky, they also conceal an ancient terror that has been told for thousands of years, sending shivers down one's spine. Since the 1890s, the disappearances, horrifying transformations, and inexplicable fears witnessed in these lands whisper that the Yee Naaldlooshii, or as they are commonly known among the people, Skinwalkers from Navajo and Hopi legends, are not merely a myth, but rather a living, breathing reality. Those who walk beneath the deep shadows of these rocks might not only see their own silhouettes, but sometimes also the unsettling reflection of another entity deeply rooted within their very soul. Could that entity subtly infiltrate your consciousness, perhaps even completely seize your innermost being? These sacred lands have held profound spiritual significance for the indigenous peoples of the region, the Navajo and Hopi tribes. For centuries, they believed these red formations were imbued with powerful energies, performing their healing rituals, hunting prayers, and tribal councils on this land in the presence of ancient spirits. Yet this deep reverence and sanctity also carried a dark aspect, always veiled, eager to emerge into the light. Whispers passed down through generations of tribes, terrifying prophecies, and an inexplicable fear that danced on the edge of consciousness, never fully understood. Among the ancient stories of the region, one of the most disturbing and dangerous entities known is the Skinwalkers. These are shamans who can assume human form, don the skins of animals, and transform into them, practicing dark magic and capable of stealing the bodies and souls of their victims. According to the tales, they not only shapeshift, but can also infiltrate the minds of their victims, steal thoughts, mimic their deepest fears, and ultimately take over an individual's entire existence, using their life for their own horrifying purposes. The ancient tribal warnings about these entities spoke of a terror that could steal not just a stranger's face, but their very soul, making you look with suspicion at even your closest loved ones or your own reflection. It's easy to dismiss these legends as mere scary stories from ancient tribes. However, towards the end of the 19th century, when the first European settlers stepped onto these lands, dreaming of hope and a new life, a chain of events began to prove that the ancient shadows were not just tales, and the relative peace of these lands slowly gave way to a suffocating, inexplicable dread. The newcomers unknowingly had awakened a power that had slumbered for centuries, opening a door that should have remained closed. It was the late 1890s. The Miller family, having migrated from the bustling industrial cities of Missouri to Phoenix, but failing to find the peace and opportunity they sought there, decided to try their luck in the then wild and pristine, fertile lands of the Sedona Valley. John Miller, in his early 40s, was a retired railroad worker. 20 years spent on arduous and grueling railroad construction had forged him a will of steel and resilience. However, he had never before been so intimately acquainted with the wild and unpredictable face of nature. This new life was for him both a hope and a realm of the unknown. His wife Eleanor, in her mid-30s, hailed from St. Louis, an elegant woman accustomed to city life. She struggled to adapt to this isolated lifestyle, but deeply respected her husband's dreams of a new beginning, showing him love and understanding. With them were their 2 young children. 8-year-old Elizabeth, with her keen intellect and cheerful nature, was the sunshine of their home, always eager to explore her surroundings. 5-year-old Thomas, on the other hand, was a quiet and introverted child, rarely straying from his older sister's side. The family built a small but sturdy cabin on the western slope of Oak Creek Canyon, right at the foot of the Red Rocks near Cedar Creek. With John's engineering skills and the robust tools he had kept from his railroad days, they quickly established a warm two-room home with a small porch. Their land was surprisingly fertile, water from Oak Creek was abundant, and the silence of the surroundings, especially during the day, initially seemed like a slice of heaven. The children loved playing outdoors, hiding among the rocks and spending time with natural toys the valley offered, such as dolls made from branches and stones. John had planted a small field around the cabin, and Eleanor cultivated vegetables and herbs in her garden. Everything seemed like a perfect picture of the new beginning they had envisioned. However, this pastoral tranquility would soon transform into something suffocating, even terrifying, with the arrival of a bleak winter. The first strangeness began in December, on the nights of the first snowfall. Strange, inexplicable sounds were heard around the cabin at night. At first, John attributed them to wild animals, bobcats, mountain lions, or perhaps packs of coyotes. He thought they might be sounds from the desert nights. But the noises grew increasingly distinct, often resembling human whispers, sometimes even seeming to float in the air like a melody. These whispers, mingled with the howl of the wind, sometimes sounded as if they were whispering their own names. Eleanor complained particularly about murmurs coming from the children's rooms at night. It was as if someone was talking to them, calling them while they slept. When she entered the room, her children would be fast asleep, as if nothing had happened. However, Eleanor began to notice a deeper, more sleep-deprived expression on the children's faces. Dark circles appeared under their eyes, and during the day they seemed more tired and distracted. John would tell Eleanor, "They're just dreaming, dear," but the worry on his wife's face deepened, and the panic in her eyes grew steadily. A few weeks later, when John went hunting in the forest, he found human footprints in the fresh snow near the cabin. The tracks belonged to someone barefoot, and strangely, they seemed to follow John's own steps, approaching the cabin, then moving away like a shadow. What was even more disturbing was that the tracks abruptly vanished in the middle of the snow, without veering off anywhere, as if the person had simply evaporated. They led neither to a bush nor to a rock. They simply ceased to exist. When John told Eleanor about this incident, his wife's eyes widened in horror, and she whispered, "They were talking about Skinwalkers, John, one of the old tribes. They're watching us. We disturbed them." Her voice trembling. John, though he considered these words mere superstitions at the time, slowly but deeply felt a fear taking root within him. An irrational but undeniable fear. The real terror began with the disappearance of little Elizabeth, altering the Miller family's lives forever. It was April 1899. Spring had arrived, and the entire valley was ablaze with the colors of wild flowers, desert hyacinths, and cactus blooms. Elizabeth, as usual, had gone to play in the small wooded area near the cabin, her favorite play spot. She usually returned within an hour, either for lunch or at her mother's call before sunset. She was an adventurous child who loved nature and wanted to explore every corner. But that day, she did not return. John and Eleanor searched everywhere until sunset, John's voice echoing in the canyons. A few neighbors from the small nearby town of Oak Creek, and even Sheriff Jedediah Stone, came to help. Sheriff Stone was an old frontiersman, tough and pragmatic, who didn't believe in ghost stories. As night fell and no trace of Elizabeth was found, panic reached its peak. The air was thick with an invisible curtain of dread. Search parties with lanterns and torches tried to illuminate the surroundings, but the shadows of the red rocks seemed to swallow every ray of light, as if even light could not penetrate these lands. The next morning, John found barefoot human footprints similar to those he had discovered the previous winter, right behind the cabin, near Elizabeth's favorite play area. The tracks were more distinct than before and resembled the footprints of a small, delicate woman or a child. The tracks led deeper into the forest, then abruptly vanished again. This time, right next to the tracks, lay Elizabeth's favorite doll, its head ripped off in a small, meticulously torn heap. The doll's wool hair was scattered on the ground, its single button eye staring blankly at John. Eleanor shrieked at the sight. Her scream echoed through the valley, silencing even the birds. Despite weeks of searching by neighbors and the local sheriff, Elizabeth was never heard from again. Although Sheriff Stone recorded the incident as a wild animal attack or kidnapping, John and Eleanor knew that something far darker, far more insidious was at play, a power beyond human comprehension. The whispers around the cabin grew louder, whispering their names and sometimes even Elizabeth's name with the wind at night. Eleanor became sleepless at night. She constantly claimed there was movement in the shadows around the cabin, and when she looked out the windows, she saw human-like but distorted silhouettes appearing and disappearing in the distance among the trees. John, meanwhile, began to worry about his wife's sanity. But he too knew that the sounds coming from the forest at night were not just the wind. They were the whispers of an incomprehensible language, carrying a more melodic, more inviting, yet also threatening rhythm. These whispers seemed to infiltrate his deepest thoughts, echoing from his subconscious. After Elizabeth's disappearance, the Miller family decided to leave Sedona. Eleanor could no longer bear to stay in the cabin for another second. Every corner was filled with Elizabeth's memories, and every silence with the whispers of the Skinwalkers. As they began to pack their belongings, John, to investigate the strange footprints and to honor his daughter's memory, perhaps to find an answer, went into the forest one last time. In his heart he carried both a father's helplessness and an intense anger towards the unknown. As he ventured deeper into the canyon, he found a semi-hidden cave entrance in the red rocks that he hadn't noticed before, almost completely overgrown by dry, gnarled cedar trees and dense thickets. The mouth of the cave was covered with branches and stones, as if someone had tried to seal it, but a strange scent carried by the wind drew John inward. It was a bizarre, nauseating mixture of decaying flesh and sweet flower, even freshly cut earth. John, his heart pounding rapidly in his chest, entered. It was pitch black inside, so dark that even the light of his lantern struggled to penetrate. The gloom, as if the darkness itself absorbed the light. In the flickering light, John saw strange, ancient drawings on the walls. These were different from the sacred symbols of the Navajo tribes. They were more primitive, more menacing. Animal shapes, human silhouettes, and a series of eerie symbols, all drawn with a reddish pigment, as if made with fresh blood. The drawings conveyed a sense of deep antiquity, as if they belonged to thousands of years ago, carrying an incomprehensible, dangerous message within them. As he descended deeper, the air current in the cave changed, and a faint, strange odor further permeated the air, stinging his nostrils. As John continued in the deepest part of the cave, he noticed something glowing in a small recess. A pendant. Elizabeth's pendant, a small silver locket with an obsidian stone that glowed. A family heirloom she wore around her neck. John picked up the pendant. The gleaming obsidian stone was cold and seemed to pulse faintly in his palm as if beating. Just then he heard a whisper from the depths of the cave. It was his own name, John. It was very clear, but the voice was unfamiliar. It resembled neither Eleanor's nor Thomas's, nor even his own. It was muffled and echoing, as if coming from underground. When he turned around in the light of his lantern, he saw a tall, slender silhouette near the entrance of the cave. The silhouette stood like a human, but there was something wrong with its posture. It was stiff like a puppet, yet moved with a strange fluidity, as if it had no bones. Its head was tilted slightly to the side, as if it was studying John intently. John's heart leapt into his throat. Each beat a drum in his ears. The lantern flickered, and the light briefly fell upon the silhouette's face. What he saw at that moment would be etched into John's soul, haunting his nightmares forever. It was Elizabeth's face, his little daughter's innocent, smiling face. But her eyes were completely black, like deep, bottomless darkness, like two black holes absorbing all light, and she had no pupils. And for a moment, in those black eyes, he saw both an ancient, inhuman intelligence and an insatiable, horrifying, endless hunger. John froze, his breath caught in his throat. Elizabeth's silhouette opened its mouth and whispered John's name. This time the voice was his daughter's, but it was also filled with something else, a fluid whisper from the depths, an echoing blend of many different voices. "Come, Father, come with us, join us, we are waiting for you." John dropped the pendant from his hand and turned, running out of the cave for his life. As he ran, he heard Elizabeth's voice behind him, then the howl of a coyote, then the muffled laughter of a young woman, and then the droning of a familiar yet wrong voice speaking, his own name echoing. The sounds followed him, matching his steps, infiltrating his mind, seeming to draw closer with every stride. When he returned to his cabin, he tried to tell Eleanor what he had seen, but words caught in his throat. He stammered. He could only whisper, "They are real, and one of them wears Elizabeth's face, and it called me in. They are all waiting for us." Following this incident, the Miller family hastily abandoned Sedona the next day. They left all their belongings behind, taking only what they could carry, and never looked back. They never returned to Sedona again. John Miller lived the rest of his life with the most terrifying truth he had ever encountered. Skinwalkers were not just a legend. They could wear the faces of your loved ones, whisper your deepest fears, and Sedona's red rocks were their insatiable, endless playground. The power of these entities had grown over time, nourished by the spiritual energy of the region, and they had begun to walk among us in human guise. Slowly and insidiously, just as the wilderness silently spreads, they infiltrated human settlements, carefully selecting their victims. In the years that followed, John was constantly plagued by nightmares. Elizabeth's black eyes and echoing voice never left him. Eleanor fell into a deep depression and passed away at a young age, unable to bear the burden of the fear she had experienced. Their only remaining child, Thomas, grew up to be a quiet and timid man, refusing to hear even the slightest whisper about the events in Sedona. So, how would this ancient fear find its place in the complexities of the modern world? And how would you know who was truly human and who was merely wearing a mask? The answer to these questions still waits in the shadows of Sedona. They wait with an unceasing, ever-growing hunger, wanting not just your body, but your very soul. However, Sedona did not forget the Skinwalkers. In fact, they did not want to be forgotten. As the years passed, especially with increasing interest in the region, disappearances and strange stories continued, as if ancient legends were taking on flesh and bone. In the 1920s, a young investigator named David Harrison, working on a farm near the town, witnessed similar types of events. Harrison, in his mid-20s, was an ambitious and curious man with a natural interest in local legends and paranormal phenomena. He was captivated by the beauty and mystery of Sedona and had begun researching local folklore and myths. He was particularly fascinated by skinwalkers, but initially viewed them only as an interesting cultural anecdote, not a real threat. One day, he received a call from Farmer Samuel Jenkins reporting the disappearance of Rex, his most loyal hunting dog, a large black Labrador. The dog was his owner's most faithful animal and never roamed freely, especially during hunting season. When Harrison followed the tracks, he found those familiar, non-human barefoot prints again. The tracks led deeper into a valley, then abruptly ended again, as if they had become part of the snow or soil. simply vanishing. At the end of the valley, Harrison found an abandoned, dilapidated cabin. The cabin appeared unused for a long time, its windows broken, its roof caved in. It was empty inside, but in a corner there was a freshly cut animal pelt. The pelt belonged to a coyote, but the way its skin had been processed was unusual, as if it had been hastily and improperly flayed or torn apart by some beast. On the walls of the cabin, symbols and drawings similar to those Miller had seen. In the cave were scribbled, some looking as if drawn with blood, repeating in a strange rhythm. As Harrison was about to leave the cabin, he noticed movement outside. What he saw was young Billy Jenkins, the farmer's 14-year-old son. Billy, strangely, seemed taller and thinner than usual, his clothes appearing a size too big for him, as if his bones had elongated unnaturally. He was slowly approaching Harrison, his steps almost silent, gliding like a shadow. "Billy, what are you doing here? Did you see Rex, the dog?" Harrison asked, his surprise evident in his voice. Billy's head was tilted at an unusual, inhuman angle, as if his neck was wrongly positioned, or something inside was manipulating him. His eyes, normally young and vibrant, appeared darker, more lifeless than usual, not absorbing light, but merely reflecting it. I found the dog," he whispered. His voice was Billy's voice, but there was an abnormality in its timbre, as if he was just learning words, each syllable articulated meticulously, with difficulty and a wrong emphasis. Harrison's hair stood on end, a shiver running down his spine. When he looked more closely at Billy's face for a moment, he noticed something indistinct and gloomy moving beneath the familiar face of Billy. It was as if there was an ancient entity, not the true owner of the face, watching him from behind. A stretched, thin mask. Billy approached Harrison and extended his hand. "Come, let me show you the dog. We took him inside. We are feeding him. He is very happy." His hand was cold, very cold as a dead man's hand, and it resembled an animal's paw more than a human hand, its nails seeming elongated. Harrison hesitated for a moment. A voice inside him screamed, "Run! Escape! Now!" But his logic told him that this was just a hallucination due to fatigue, or that young Billy was playing a prank, or perhaps he was ill. Then in Billy's mouth, between his teeth, he saw something shiny and white. It was a small, sharp piece of bone, as if it had just been gnawed on, like a fresh bone. And at that moment Harrison understood everything. Billy was not Billy. He quickly pulled his hand back and dashed out of the cabin, running for his life without looking back, his heart pounding as if it would burst from his chest. As he ran, he heard Billy's voice behind him, but it was no longer a child's voice. It was a deeper, more muffled, echoing voice, coming from the depths of an ancient cave, multiple entities speaking in unison. "Don't run. You will come too. Everyone comes. Everyone joins us. You too. You will be ours." Harrison fled Sedona that day and never returned. Farmer Samuel Jenkins reported his son's disappearance, and local authorities assumed Billy had gotten lost in the wilderness, stating he had fallen victim to a mountain lion attack. However, David Harrison lived the rest of his life with the most terrifying truth he had ever encountered. Skinwalkers were not just a legend. They could wear the faces of your loved ones, whisper your deepest fears, and Sedona's red rocks were their insatiable, endless playground. The power of these entities had grown over time, nourished by the spiritual energy of the region, and they had begun to walk among us in human guise. Slowly and insidiously, just as the wilderness silently spreads, they infiltrated human settlements, carefully selecting their victims. Like John Miller, Harrison too was crushed under the weight of this horrifying truth. He lived a solitary life, looking with suspicion at every unfamiliar face, his heart pounding whenever he saw movement in the shadows. In the 1960s, Sedona had transformed into an international hub for the New Age movement, and spiritual quests. The region's purported vortex energies attracted thousands of healers, psychics, mystics, and individuals seeking supernatural experiences like a magnet. You could find a spiritual consultant on every corner, a meditation group on every trail. However, most of these new visitors were unaware that the whispers of the Red Rocks did not only carry positive energies, but also hosted a much older, much darker entity. Among the local populace, especially the older Native American families, whispers circulated, "The newcomers are awakening the ancient ones. The lands have awakened, but not only good things have stirred." During this period, the first modern reports emerged regarding missing spiritual seekers and strange encounters in the desert. Typically, individuals who went hiking alone for meditation or to visit energy points vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an abandoned car, a deserted campsite, or a fragment of a map. Most unsettling were those found days later, miles from where they disappeared, in a remote corner of the desert, completely transformed in personality, with blurred or entirely erased memories. These individuals remembered nothing of their old lives, sometimes even struggling to articulate their own names. Like Billy, whom David Harrison encountered, their gazes held an unfamiliar emptiness, their movements an odd stiffness, and their voices an echoing, unusual timbre. Many claimed to have experienced a new awakening, but the accompanying strangeness and emotional void profoundly disturbed those around them. Local authorities attempted to classify these incidents as wilderness accidents or psychological issues, but the recurring patterns and peculiar details pointed to something far deeper. The sheer volume of spiritual seekers during this era had inadvertently become a new source of sustenance for the Skinwalkers. These open-minded, questioning individuals, with their eager, conscious minds, were more fertile targets for their infiltration and mimicry abilities. Sedona's magic was slowly turning into a nightmare. By the 1980s, the FBI began investigating an increasing number of unexplained disappearances and identity shifts in northern Arizona. These incidents, particularly concentrated in Sedona, baffled federal agents and went beyond conventional investigative methods. Agent Michael Stevens, in his late 30s, a seasoned officer transferred from New York with experience in homicide and organized crime, was assigned to one of these cases. However, everything he encountered in Sedona challenged his logic, forcing him to question everything he had learned in his career. The missing persons' cars were found, their personal belongings intact, but the individuals themselves were gone, as if an invisible hand had simply taken them away. Witnesses reported that when they last saw the missing person, they were acting strangely. Their eyes were blank, making mechanical movements, or their voice sounded different. In one case, a photograph of a missing tourist was taken, but in the photo, a momentary distortion or blur was noticed on the tourist's face, as if their face had momentarily transformed into something else, adopting an inhuman, ancient expression. Although these photographs were officially dismissed as camera error or trick of light, they gnawed at Stevens' mind, making him more suspicious each day. When Stevens reviewed old reports from the local Navajo police, he came across ancient stories about skinwalkers. Although he initially dismissed them as superstitions, the strange similarities and illogical nature of the incidents deeply troubled him. Traditional police records offered no answers, so the orally transmitted legends led Agent Stevens to the wise elders of the region. A meeting with a specific Navajo elder, Thomas Yazzie, fundamentally altered Stevens' perspective. Elder Yazzie invited Stevens into his hogan and, while serving him bitter tea made from dried herbs over a crackling fire, recounted, "They have always been here, the dark side of these rocks' spirits. But it has become easier for them to take human form in modern times. People's spiritual hunger has whetted their appetite. The energy of the rocks helps them keep their doors open. They take not only bodies, but also memories, stories, even souls. They walk among you in your likeness, but truly nothing of you remains inside them. Only a shell, a mask. And worst of all, most of you don't even realize it until it's too late. Yazzie explained that the Skinwalkers' greatest power was their ability to mimic, to approach you wearing the faces of your loved ones, those you trusted most. You never see them with their true eyes, Yazzie said. Their eyes are always empty, always dark, just like the inside of a deep cave. Although Stevens included Yazzie's words in his report, they were dismissed by official authorities as local folklore and the imagination of an old man, and the case was pushed to be closed. But Stevens could not forget the fear and seriousness in the Navajo elder's eyes, nor the whispers he heard in his ears. They talked to you too. Stevens secretly continued to follow the officially closed case. Using his own resources, he contacted the families of the missing persons, listened to their stories, and understood more each day that the terror lurking in Sedona's shadows was not just a legend, but a living reality. One of the most terrifying incidents occurred in the mid-1990s, bringing Sedona's ancient secret to the modern world. Emily Carter, a young psychology student from Phoenix, came to Sedona for her doctoral thesis research. 22-year-old Emily was remarkably intelligent, with a keen interest in the dark and inexplicable aspects of human psychology. She was intrigued by local legends, paranormal events, and claims of spiritual energy in the region. She was particularly interested in stories she heard about vanishing trails, shifting landscapes, and strange flows of time in the area. One day, while hiking alone on one of the trails near Bell Rock, she saw a very old Navajo woman, her face lined but her eyes sharp and wise, sitting among the rocks. The woman waved to her and said, "Come, my child, listen to the stories." Emily found the woman's voice gentle and inviting. It was tired yet wise, as if carrying the wisdom of centuries. When she sat down beside her, the old woman began to tell her stories about skinwalkers, shape-shifting entities, stolen souls, possessed bodies, and an insatiable generational hunger. When the woman finished her story, she took Emily's hand. Her palms were wrinkled, but her touch was surprisingly cold. She looked into Emily's eyes. "You too have a quest within you, don't you? Things you want to know, they want to know too. They are listening to you. They always listen. To your every thought, every fear, every desire." Emily shivered at the woman's words, yet a deep curiosity urged her to learn more, to peel back the curtain of this ancient mystery. The woman placed a small, smooth, cold obsidian stone in Emily's palm. The stone felt oddly heavy in her hand. "This will protect you. But be careful. Do not believe everything you see, for they can wear the face of even your most loved one, the one you trust most, and sometimes even your own face. You cannot even trust your own reflection." Emily thanked her and continued on her way. The stone in her palm seemed to pulse faintly, as if beating. But as she walked, she heard a voice behind her. It was her own name, Emily. The voice was her mother's, the voice of the person Emily trusted and loved most, who was always there for her. When she turned around, she saw the old Navajo woman she had just spoken to on the trail. The woman was smiling at her with her mother's face. The expression on her face was her mother's gentle, loving smile. But her eyes were not like the old woman's, but like the bottomless black eyes of Elizabeth in John Miller's Nightmares, light-absorbing, empty, lifeless eyes. Emily froze, a chilling weight settling in her chest. Her mother extended her hands and said, "Emily, my dear, why are you so far away? You must come home. You must rest. We are all waiting for you. You must be with us." Her voice was her mother's, but the words came out strangely, as if each syllable was carefully, laboriously articulated from a foreign mouth, like a game. Emily felt the coldness and weight of the obsidian stone in her palm. The stone seemed to burn her hand. Her mother's face for a moment shimmered, blurred, like a ripple in liquid, and was replaced by something formless, gloomy, vague, dark, inhuman. Then it returned to her mother's face, but this face was no longer Emily's mother's face. It was merely an imitation, a shadow, a monster wearing her mother's body. Emily screamed and ran. As she rushed down the trail, she heard her mother's voice behind her, then the old woman's voice, then the howl of a coyote, and then the droning of a familiar yet wrong echoing voice, a combined sound of many different entities speaking her own name. The sounds followed her, matching her steps, infiltrating her mind, seeming to draw closer with every stride. Emily survived Sedona that day, but she never completed her thesis. The trauma she experienced pushed her away from her career, and, for the rest of her life, she felt alone, even in crowds, looking at the faces around her with suspicion. The obsidian stone remained with her, by her bedside, but it filled her heart with fear forever. For she knew that skinwalkers were real, that they roamed, watching her every moment. In later years, Emily tried to live a quiet life away from Sedona, but every night she saw in her dreams those faces appearing in the shadows of Bell Rock, those black eyes, and those familiar yet wrong voices calling her. Today, Sedona is still promoted as a center for spiritual quests and peace. Thousands of tourists flock here every year to experience the vortex energies, meditate, and breathe in the spiritual atmosphere of the city. However, some old Native American families and local historians know that behind the city's bright facades and tourist attractions, an ancient terror still lurks. National Park Service records still occasionally receive reports of unexplained disappearances, people leaving no trace, and strange behaviors in the region. Typically, the vanished are solo hikers or those staying in isolated campsites. Search teams often find only abandoned belongings or spots where a person's tracks abruptly end, sometimes errors or blurs in previously taken photographs of the missing person are noticed, as if a shadow or another entity had infiltrated the picture. Caves and canyons in the region are marked as dangerous by authorities, and access to them is restricted. But the true reason behind these prohibitions is never explained. It is simply stated as for visitor safety. According to whispers still circulating among the local populace, skinwalkers are not just a legend, they are ancient entities that feed on humanity's most primal fears, stealing identities and forms, walking among us. They sustain their existence by shapeshifting, gaining your trust, and then turning you into one of them. The ancient shadows of the red rocks, once harboring only mystery, now conceal a more insidious threat. How much can you trust the person you see? What truly lurks behind the face of your most loved one? And most importantly, if these ancient shadows ultimately come to steal your identity, what can you do against it? The red rocks of Sedona wait silently. The secrets beneath them still call with an insatiable, never-ending hunger. Perhaps one day, you too will heed that call, and Sedona's unique beauty will mesmerize you. And on that day, when you look in the mirror, the person you see might not be you. The face you trust most could actually be your greatest nightmare. For they are still among us, waiting for the perfect body for their next mimicry. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and support us for more content like this.